Hello there, and welcome to You Don't Know Her, the mindset podcast, all about creating the best life for yourself, one by design and not by default. And today we're absolutely delighted to be joined by the incredibly talented Amaan Rashid. I'm
Hi
sure
there.
he's probably a bit too humble to say that about himself, but
Yeah, you're too kind. You're too kind.
but yeah, before we kind of delve into everything, it'd be good to have a little bit of a background in yourself, Amaan. So do you want to kind of talk about your journey, kind of where you've been, what you're on with at the moment, future, just anything like that to give a flavor of who you are?
Very good question. So it's gonna go so off tangent, but yeah, I'll start. So went to uni. I did business and management as a degree, but I was part of the TV Society on the side. So that's where I usually made a lot of like my experience and work, where I would help out at the uni for like the live streaming for music videos, helping get my friends out for short films, just always being part of the set, doing
Yeah.
different roles from like cameras to post-production to helping on the sound. So that was a good way I started off. And another way that I really like got more confidence was doing a lot of photography because I
Mm.
had like a Canon 550D DSLR, right?
Oh wow.
So like I bought it for like video camera stuff, but like the excuse I got to get it from my dad was like, oh yeah, I can do a lot of like the family photography and stuff.
Mm.
So I ended up doing a lot of photography back in uni, even though I was using more as a video camera. I used it more for photography, so I took a lot of photos and group photos of like the different societies and events. And it's a thing where it forces you to be technical, but also to be very sociable and like talk to all these people. Because there's a very famous photography saying which goes like, when you're a portrait photographer, you're like 90% therapist and like 10% photographer because everyone's self-conscious in front of the camera, no matter like how beautiful or how talented you are. So it's all about just talking to them, making them feel comfortable, distracting them from the camera, just, giving them a relaxed mood. And I use those skills even when it comes to my video days now, where it's like we're in a place where we're shooting with like three cameras in front of an actor, and then a bit self-conscious. So you're just talking them, relaxing them, making them feel confident from the camera until it gets to a point where like they forget the camera's even there.
Mm. Yeah, that's so important, I think, to be. I've had that conversation with a few people, even actors as well. There's a couple of
Mm.
actors I've been talking to that said they've never really done where it's them in a podcast or them in an interview, so they're a bit apprehensive. It's strange to me because they're happy being as a character in front of a camera on a set or something like that. But it's so strange. But I wanted to pick you up on one of the first things you said about your degree, the business and management thing,
Mm.
because that's actually the degree I did as well, business
I
management.
love it.
And the thing for me was, I knew at the time when I was doing it, before I even started the course, I knew I didn't want to go into the corporate world really as like to be a business manager. I knew that wasn't my interest, but it was something I was good at. And everyone was telling me that's a good degree to have. It's a lot more valuable than something like, media studies, not knocking anyone with media studies or anything like that. But for example, as a overall thing to give your options, do you think that's the way of the world generally, that it kind of looks at arts and the performing arts as kind of that's a nice to have for certain people, but you're not going to really make any money from it? Is that something you kind of battled with throughout your career?
Well, you see, that's a very good question. So, well, you see, it's the family upbringing, like it's a hard thing to say to your parents, like you want to get into filmmaking. So sometimes it's always important, to do things that make them happy, but also gives you a good safety net, in case things go wrong. Because
Mm.
filmmaking or any creative industry, a lot of it is really just initiative taking and doing it yourself. So the degree doesn't always matter because you can always be self-sufficient. So that's why I wasn't too fussed about doing a filmmaking degree because I knew for a fact I didn't need to do a filmmaking degree to like get into films because I knew being part of like the Demon TV Filmmaking Society, I was going to do a lot of film camera stuff and I do a lot of research on my own. So I knew I was going to be fine. But I think my friend, yesterday we were actually talking about this about the film degree thing,
Mm.
and it's less about as well doing the degree, but it's more about just having this environment where you're allowed to create. So I don't knock anyone for doing a film degree
Mm.
because she said it so succinctly, where it's like being a university student, it gives you the safety net and the comfort to experiment, try out equipment, and
Mm.
just have this environment where you can just be creative. And not
Mm.
everyone gets that luxury. So I guess if you have the chance to go to uni and do filmmaking, it's a good way to start in on how industry set works
Yeah.
and how you can have the opportunity in the networking, because the networking, that's killer.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
but
a way
for
just
sure.
to meet like-minded people as well. who can
Mm.
really help you out.
That's what it all is in
Hmm.
filmmaking. And so my background's more in songwriting, and I've known that my career would have got absolutely nowhere really with that unless it was through making connections that I made and people that have
Hmm.
skills that I don't have. And obviously the same applies in filmmaking. You look at the end credits of anything, whether it's a short or a feature-length film or whatever. There's so many credits, isn't there? Because there's so many people that are instrumental to whatever it may be, what you may think is the smallest roles on a set, it's still all adds to a big end product, doesn't it?
It's true, like people forget like filmmaking's a big like teamwork environment, so you have to work with a lot of different people from different backgrounds.
Mm.
And like you are like what's that saying again? Like greater than the sum?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, everyone's like so valuable and so important,
Mm.
and you do learn like how to work with people well. So, because I come from a big sporting background of like rugby and basketball, so I was able to bring that mentality onto the film set,
Yeah.
where it's like, on a sports set, psychology is so important. So
Mm.
if the team's feeling down, demotivated, like you're not going to perform well.
Yeah.
So you just always got to keep that momentum up, the motivation up, because as a director, you're the captain of the ship.
Yeah.
And if people are looking to you for guidance and for your energy,
Mm.
so if you don't bring that energy, even if it's like false energy,
Mm.
everyone's gonna get demotivated, especially when you're doing like 11-hour days and it's rainy and it's cold. You have to keep going forward, and you
Mm.
can't let go.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you've got to know, and this is what I do with everyone that comes on the show. I kind of listen to their strengths and take advice from them because I think they've got certain things that I don't have, just from their own experiences. And I actually heard an interesting podcast or an interview with a director who was the director of an episode of League of Their Own, the James Corden
No, yeah.
show. And he was saying that he was is kind of his speciality is things like Master Chef or something like that, where it's food and it's captured, and they were doing a kind of parody version of that on League of Their Own. So they invited him to come and direct this episode because they thought you've done this there, you can do it for us. So he came on the set and he said it went very well. He brought his crew with him and it was all good stuff. And then he said as they were getting towards the end of the shoot, he said he just grabbed his crew around in a circle and said, right, we've not actually got much time now because some of the talent have to go basically. We're going to do this way, which will get every shot we need within about 5 minutes. And he said, we'll do that and it'll be really good. And then he was explaining. But before he had time to kind of finish off explaining, James Corden came over to them and said, what you're doing, it's so simple, just point camera and film. And he was like, oh, okay. He's like, well, I'm just trying to speed things up because, and James Corden didn't let him say the point and said, no, no, I'm going to come out, you film me, and then I'm going to have the next person come out, you film them. And he said, okay, okay. And they did it, and it took about an hour. And then the guy and then James Corden was like running late or whatever, and he had to go. And the guy just said on the podcast, he said, look, if he set his ego aside and realized that we were having a brief chat so that we could try and make it more streamlined and efficient, then it would have actually been more beneficial. But is that something you've ever encountered where you've kind of thought, even people that aren't as known as some other people, that they maybe don't get the respect they deserve, or is that maybe something that happens in the film world? I don't really know. It's not an industry I'm in.
Well, I think like unfortunately, egos are universal regardless of industry.
Mm.
It's just the fact that filmmaking is a bit more of a well-known industry, which
Mm.
like people like know more about. So
Mm.
it's become a bit more complacent. Like nobody's really knows much about like the accounting industry and like the egos in
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
and not many people talk about it.
Mm.
So unfortunately, the filmmaking industry, because it's a creative industry, you're very like branded, iconic.
Mm.
Unfortunately, you can get attitudes and egos, and it's trying to stay composed and trying to explain to someone who may not be the most tech savvy why it's going to take time
Mm.
and why you need that, what needs to be done.
Mm.
Of course, people like, have an ego and attitude, but it's about staying composed as yourself and tell them calmly what needs to be done in a very simple manner because they may just say point and shoot, but it's not pointing and shooting. Yeah,
Mm.
the camera's heavy, so everything has to be moved, which takes time.
Mm.
You have to focus, zoom, light it all.
Mm.
Like there's a very famous saying which goes, it's not the take that takes time, it's the time between the takes that takes the most time. And
Mm.
that's a very funny way of putting it because yeah, the shot can only last for like 20 seconds. But
Yeah,
if you have to lift all the equipment, the lighting, reset the makeup, the costume, the
yeah.
continuity, it all adds up. So
Yeah.
you have to explain very succinctly to the person who may not be the most technically experienced
Yeah.
why it's going to take a bit more time. I think
Yeah.
this is why it's quite important as a filmmaker to have a overall general knowledge of every department from camera to lighting to costume. Because
Mhm.
people don't realize, like, even on big sets, as soon as they say take, the costume people, the makeup people, the props people, the person in charge of script supervising will all play back the footage. We'll see if there's any issues, if anything has to be reset. That takes time. You can't be like, okay, let's rush, rush, rush. Because if you rush it, then it's like suddenly the person picks up the glass with the opposite hand, or the hair's off, or people realize there's like a mark left on the floor which has to be painted out in the post.
Mhm.
But having an overall knowledge gives you a better understanding of what everyone does, and you can be a bit more patient and understand why things are taking time
Mhm.
and why not to rush things, because quality does take time.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Mm.
It's funny you should mention all that kind of time thing because a few years ago, I'm a big fan of sitcoms
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of the show Extras, the Ricky Gervais show.
Yeah.
And the mention in the behind the scenes in one of the things on the DVD, they said there's this scene you may remember it if you've seen the show, but Taron Lamb, the agent's got this pen, I think, this nude pen or whatever, and you turn it upside down and all that sort of stuff. But he said it was a 30-second like clip in the actual show. It's 30 seconds of the TV show, but they said it took them a full day, I think, to actually shoot that scene because they both just kept corpse and they both kept laughing and they couldn't get through it. And like you say, it was in between, it was resetting everything back up, like and have to put the cameras back to where they are for the start of the scene and then panning around or whatever and things like that. So, in terms of your own projects that you're working on, either at the moment for anything unreleased or recent releases, is that something you've seen of kind of taken a bit more time to say, right, let's get this right now. Let's plan to get it done correctly, and then that'll just it's all about executing that plan there. Is that something that's quite big on your
That's
project?
true. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because basically I have like this quote which goes like, if you save time in production, you're gonna lose it in post, or
Mm,
if you lose time in like production, you're gonna save it in post.
mm,
Let's say, for example, you get the lighting wrong for the scene
mm,
and you're shooting out of order. Well, you're gonna have to go back again or reshoot it, or you're gonna have to go into the grade and recolor grade it to make it match.
mm.
So adding a little bit more time now in production will just gonna save you so much time in the future.
Yeah.
Because what people don't realize is especially when you're shooting a lot of like narrative stuff, you're not shooting in order, you're shooting out of order.
Mm. Oh
For example,
yeah.
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 For example, the last short film I directed, we were in the Tyneside Irish Centre, and then at my home, and then on the street. So of course we're not gonna shoot scene one at my home, drive
Mm.
all the way to the city centre for the second scene, and then drive all the way back to home, probably for
Yeah.
the third scene. No, you shoot by like location and timings, and
Yeah.
because of that, things can get out of order continuity wise. So you
Mm.
have to make sure everything matches up. So
Mm.
if nighttime has been shown as blue we can't suddenly show in the next shot that it's suddenly become sodium vapor. So getting
Yeah.
it right, especially uh, so getting it right the first time is always so important.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just laugh because my friend is so in on kind of continuity and we'll sit and we'll watch shows and she'll point out anything that goes on with it with like she'll just chuckle and I'll turn and I'm not seeing anything and she'll go play that back, you can see the boom mic in the window there or something like that and you'll go back and then it's there or and she'll laugh and it'll be like the hair's on the wrong side of the face, between shots it'll be like the hair goes here and then over here. Is that something? Is that part of your role? Are you kind of there for continuity as well and editing, or kind of is that something that falls into your remit?
Well, it varies, you see, from like indie to professional side, because when you go more high-end production, every role is so specialized that there'll just be one person in charge of the continuity, and there'll be people in every single department whose just one job is to maintain the continuity.
Mhm.
But when you go onto the more lower production budget end, like everyone has to wear multiple hats.
Mm,
I am a bit of a guilty of not maintaining too much continuity because what's more important is like the story and the performances and getting the
mm.
shots right.
Yeah.
And there's a really great line from like Thelma Shoemaker, who's a editor. She's Martin Scorsese's editor,
Mm,
and she goes like she in like fan in like uh PG. in PG polite words, she was just like, I don't really care about continuity, it's about the performance.
Mm.
And it is true because at the end of the day, if you, the audience, has noticed the continuity, that's saying that's more indicative of like the story being boring and not being interesting enough that you're actually paying attention to things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's a great example of the Dark Knight, the Joker Batman interrogation.
Mm.
There's a scene when Batman grabs him against the wall and his arm's like this, and then in the reverse shot, it's like this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You
And you're
don't
not really
notice.
noticing it, isn't it? Because the performance is so phenomenal, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Like, imagine if the editor was like, oh, we're going to maintain continuity, so it's going to stay like this the whole time. So we'll use the worst performances just to make the continuity person happy, you know? It's like, well,
yeah,
what's more important,
yeah.
that continuity of the arm or telling the best story with the best performances and the best shots?
Yeah, so that's why you go for that. That makes sense. Actually, that's something I've never heard before, really. The kind of because I mean, for me, I think one of the best actors on the planet is Leonardo DiCaprio. I think he gives so many incredible performances. I mean, Django Unchained is a great example of that.
Yeah.
But I was actually just speaking on an episode recently with a friend who's in filmmaking as well, and he said we talked a lot about Shutter Island, and we were talking about
Great
and
movie.
yeah, phenomenal movie. I love that. I might watch it again really soon. Actually, it's been a while since I've seen it, but there's a scene, and it's done intentionally. I don't know if you remember or if you've clicked on.
I think I know which one you're about to talk about, but go
Yeah,
on.
the scene with the woman with the glass in her hand, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, yeah, which is such a minor thing, and I didn't notice it first time watching. It's a woman sat at a table and she's taking a drink from a glass and then puts it down, and she never has the glass in her hand the whole time. And it's an important thing because it's slightly into Leonardo DiCaprio's character's mind, isn't it? It's part of
Hmm.
the reason of that scene, why it's so important. But as an audience, you don't really pay attention. But it's like you say as well, you're not gonna pay attention because unless you're super into that sort of thing, because you're drawn by the performances of the actors on the screen and things like that, and obviously all the work that's gone into it as well. Is that kind of adding to the point that you were making as well?
That is, and actually, that's a very good movie example because they always say you should watch a movie twice.
Mm,
First for the story and second for everything else.
mm,
So, without spoil anything, when you watch Shutter Island for the first time, you take it very literally. But then once the plot's revealed to you and you watch it a second time, every adjustment and every point and every subtle thing they've used adds up, and you understand why the second time you've watched it, why the woman doesn't have a glass in her hand when she's drinking water,
mm,
and everything gets explained, and you go, "Oh, now I get it."
mm. Yeah, yeah, and it all becomes so clear, doesn't it, at the end?
Yeah,
But
like movies aren't made for like one viewing; they're made for constant viewing.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
can always go back to it and really enjoy it, you know? Like music, you don't listen to a song once to be like, okay, I'm done now. You listen to it more than once and you hear all the subtle details and like all the layers of the music and the
Yeah.
tonality and like the meaning of the lyrics.
That's the thing for me now as a a songwriter now. Part of the advice I was given at the start of my songwriting journey was just focus on each individual aspect of the song every time you listen to it. Tell in your mind, say, right, I'm going to listen out for the drums here or something like that, and then you're like listening just for the drums or whatever, or you're trying as best you can, and then you're listening to layers. And now every time I listen to a song, well, regardless of the song, as long as it's well produced and well written, I will enjoy it regardless of genre because I know how much effort's gone into it, and I know like things you won't even think about. I mean, the song, just talk about a song example, for example, is the song Umbrella by Rihanna. That was
That's a
made
great song.
Great song, phenomenal song, but that was made from a pre-existing loop pedal, a drum pedal on an Apple on GarageBand on the Apple Mac. It's just a that was like just a pre-existing thing, and then they built the whole song on that, and it's like that's so incredible that one tiny bit has sparked this song that became a number one hit for her, I believe, and really excelled her career.
I do love that because people forget it's like every idea has been done before, but
Mm,
it's your execution that hasn't been done before, you know?
mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, it's a great story. It's like everyone references Hamlet, right? But
Mm,
Hamlet is inspired by like old thousand-year-old Scandinavian story called Amleth, which is
mm,
just uh Hamlet with just the A put from the back to the front, you know?
yeah. Yeah.
So it's like people feeling, oh, everything should be new, or oh, my idea should be so revolutionary, like
Mm,
the change it. It's like a reinvents the wheel. But it's
yeah.
more about your execution of the idea, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree because I've heard quite a few people over the years say there's no point in me trying that because there's already better people or there's already someone and things like that. But in music, for me, the best band that's ever been is the Beatles. I think that's without question for me. But you look at the early Beatles stuff, they did a cover of Twist and Shout, which they believed was a cover of the Isley Brothers. But the Isley Brothers covered a band called the Top Knots. And it was like, so everyone has kind of, the Beatles wouldn't have been the Beatles without all the bands and artists that went before them, and they became who they were from their inspirations of that kind of thing. So is that true to filmmaking for the top level directors? You think they've obviously drawn from other
I would
things?
say, well, your well, to be fair is your inspiration has inspiration, you know.
Mm,
They,
yeah,
like every idea may have been done before, but your way of doing it hasn't been done before.
yeah, yeah.
Like that's what separates you because every genre, everything's been done. It's like revenge movies have been done countless times, but what makes movies like John Wick phenomenal is the fact they bring that Asian style fighting of like the wide angle lenses, letting the action play out,
Mm,
hasn't been done mostly for a Western audience, or
yeah,
even something as simple as the movie Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood.
mm,
Everyone's watched a cowboy movie before,
yeah,
but no one's watched the anti-cowboy movie about like, it's not a great it's not a great position to be in, and like, revenge just leads to nothing, leads to being unsatisfied and just, no
mm, yeah,
catharticism. Yeah, I think that's the
yeah.
word.
That's so interesting. It's yeah, it's honestly I'm gonna go away after this and watch so many more films with a new film. Films that I've because I generally have been watching films maybe once or so and go, okay, I've seen that now. But like you say, if you go back and there's just so many layers in there. But I wanted to quickly mention that just again, and I'll finally move on from songwriting after this. But that woman there above my head, Billie Eilish, she is she said that the whole reason she got into music, I mean, she had a tremendously talented brother as well and still obviously worked
Yeah,
together.
Phineas, isn't
Phineas,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he's quite possibly the best producer in the world. So it's amazing that she's got him on the team. But she said the reason she wanted to get into music so much was because of a song by an artist called Aurora, and Aurora released a song
Oh
called
yeah, I know her. She's great.
she's great, she's phenomenal, and she released a song called Runaway or Runaways, I think, and Billie Eilish said that that song on its own and everything about that song made her think, I want to do that as well. I want to release music and try to get that thing to do what it can do, what it's done for Billie Eilish, that Aurora song. She wants to do that to other people, and I'd say personally, I think all three of those on the wall are the three biggest artists in the world: Taylor Swift, Billie Eilish, and Harry Styles. So, in terms of contemporary pop, sorry, and yeah, so it's incredible that all of them have come where they are from inspirations of those that have gone before them, essentially.
Sure. Well, funny enough, I mentioned we have two stories, like one music, one video.
Mm.
Well, I think there's a really good one about the band Velvet Goldmine.
Hmm.
There's a very good saying where it's like not many people attended their first concert, but everyone who attended made a band.
Mm.
I think
Oh,
I swear it's like
yeah.
really famous bands like Joy Division and stuff
Mm.
like that, so on. And
Yeah.
there's a second one about like the impact of Star Wars.
Mm.
Star Wars really affected James Cameron and Ridley Scott.
Mm.
So like James Cameron, I think at this moment was still a truck driver, and then he watched Star Wars. So he's like, what am I doing with my life? I
Yeah.
want to make something amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the same time, Ridley Scott was making a lot of commercials,
Mm.
and I think he just done Duel, which was like his first debut film, and he's like, what am I doing? I want to make something big and special,
Yeah.
like Star Wars. And that's inspiration. But however,
Mm.
Star Wars is inspired by loads of like old-fashioned films, like the samurai films, and there's a lot of inspiration from Akira
Mm.
Kurosawa in them, like R2-D2 and C-3PO, or
Mm.
like inspirations from previous Akira Kurosawa films. Even like
Yeah.
the way Star Wars does like the wipes and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like that those inspirations like we like James Cameron and Scott were inspired by George Lucas. Then George Lucas was inspired by Akira Kurosawa, and Akira Kurosawa was inspired by ye old Japanese samurai inspiration.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like a cycle.
Yeah. It's
A trickle down
absolutely.
effect, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's yeah, and you can tell some of the inspiration that come through. But I can't believe we're here already. But I could talk to you for another episode about Star Wars. But I think
Yeah,
that's
you
the
just bring me
end.
back on, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have you back on. But it's been great, Aman. So just one final question for you
Of
is: if
course.
people do want to find you, where can they find you? What can you point the people to?
That's great. So my Instagram account is probably my most active. So that's just Amaan.r. That's where I try to post a lot of my portfolio stuff. And I usually put links to like my short films and portfolio work, I'd say.
Amazing. Amazing, perfect. Yeah, I'll link that in the description of this video as well, so people check
Super.
that out. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. Take care.
You're welcome. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.